Welcome to Israel Now News. I'm Rebecca Roberts.
And I'm Yochanan El Rom.
In our top story, the Jewish state is preparing for the possibility of an all-out war with the Hezbollah terror group in Lebanon. The Iranian-backed guerrilla army has launched more than 19,000 rockets into Israel since October 7th, prompting the evacuation of tens of thousands of Israelis from their homes in the north. Hezbollah is believed to have a massive arsenal of 150,000 rockets, as well as 1,500 precision-guided missiles, which pose an imminent threat to the Jewish state. Last week, Hassan Nasrallah, the leader of Hezbollah, threatened to wage war on Israel without restraints, rules, or limits. The IDF has bolstered its presence in the region, redeploying troops and other resources from Gaza to northern Israel in order to combat this rising threat. Israeli officials have confirmed that the countdown to war with Hezbollah has begun and will only stop if the terror group adheres to a diplomatic agreement which demands the evacuation of Hezbollah troops from the border area.
In another devastating blow to the Jewish state, the administration of U.S. President Joe Biden has announced it has removed emergency protocols it put in place to fast-track weapons to Israel. These procedures were implemented in the beginning of the war with Hamas, but since then, Biden has halted the flow of weapons. Israel is fighting for its very existence, simultaneously defending itself from the Hamas terror group in Gaza, Hezbollah in the north, Iranian proxy armies in the region, and against the head of the snake, the fanatic Islamic regime in Iran, which directs and funds the campaign of international death and destruction.
The Hezbollah terror group is reportedly storing Iranian weapons at the Beirut International Airport. According to a report in The Telegraph, Lebanese whistleblowers have reported that large and frequent shipments of ballistic missiles, laser-guided anti-tank weapons, rockets, explosives, and toxic chemicals are arriving at the facility from Iran. One informant reported that the top Hezbollah commanders have been seen meeting with Lebanese customs officers at the Beirut airport. In an attempt to disprove the accusation, Lebanese officials held a tour of the airport and its facilities for journalists and ambassadors last week. The tour was abruptly cut short when security officers prevented them from inspecting the air cargo center, where intelligence experts believe the weapons are being stored.
Israel's ambassador to the United Nations, Gilad Erdan, has accused UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres of being an accomplice to terror. Erdan said Guterres essentially justified the October 7th massacre in Israel, claiming that it did not happen in a vacuum. The UN chief has repeatedly refused to demand that Hamas be designated as a terrorist organization. Erdan stressed that the UN leader only convened the Security Council on behalf of Gaza while ignoring Israel and the hostages held by Hamas. Erdan insists the sole aim of Guterres has been to help Hamas survive the war. The Israeli diplomat added that he believes the Secretary General is an accomplice to terror and should resign today.
In scenes reminiscent of the pogroms perpetrated by the brown shirts of Nazi Germany, Jews were attacked by violent pro-Palestinian mobs in Los Angeles last week. The vicious crowds reportedly surrounded the Adass Torah synagogue, preventing Jews from entering, and footage of the riot shows Jews being beaten and kicked by the mob. California Governor Gavin Newsom, who has been harshly criticized for his lax position on pro-Palestinian riots, released a statement condemning the violent clashes at the Jewish house of worship. He said such anti-Semitic hatred has no place in California.
Over 100 Israeli citizens who lost loved ones on October 7th have filed a lawsuit against the United Nations Relief and Works Agency, claiming it aided and abetted Hamas. UNRWA is accused of crimes against humanity and of helping Hamas to perpetrate the massacre of 1,200 people in Israel. The suit alleges that UNRWA knowingly provided Hamas with U.S. dollars in cash that it used to pay smugglers for weapons, explosives, and other terrorist material. It also states that the UN organization allowed the Iranian-backed terror group to store deadly weapons in its facilities and to construct terror tunnels underneath UNRWA buildings. Israel has proven that several UNRWA employees took part in the October 7th massacre and that some of them held Israeli hostages in their homes. The $1 billion lawsuit also stressed that Hamas did not carry out the attacks without assistance and that the defendants, including 7 former current heads of the Palestinian Relief Agency, were warned repeatedly that their policies were directly providing assistance to the Hamas terror group.
The United Kingdom and other European states are prepared to snap back sanctions against Iran for its rapidly progressing nuclear weapons program. Barbara Woodward, the British ambassador to the United Nations, announced that Iran's dangerous advances have brought it to the brink of nuclear breakout. Speaking at a meeting of the implementation of the Obama-brokered Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action Agreement, Woodward told the UN Security Council that it must continue to work through diplomatic channels, which may include UN snapback sanctions before the JCPOA expires in 2025. Last week, Tehran announced that it is tripling its uranium enrichment capacity at the Fordo facility. The E3, consisting of the UK, France, and Germany, recently announced that Iran's rapidly progressing nuclear weapons program has no credible civilian justification.
Islamic gunmen carried out coordinated attacks on churches and synagogues in the Russian province of Dagestan. 2 Jewish houses of worship were set ablaze. Russian authorities said nearly 24 people were killed and 46 others were wounded in the attacks carried out by what it called a foreign Islamic sleeper cell. Intelligence officials believe the deadly rampage was perpetrated by the Islamic State's North Caucasus branch.
Residents of the devastated southern Israeli community of Kibbutz Be'eri attended a cornerstone laying ceremony for a new neighborhood in their ravaged community. Kibbutz Be'eri was destroyed by Hamas terrorists who infiltrated Israel on October 7th and slaughtered over 100 residents of the town and burned more than 150 buildings there. Last week, the community gathered to lay the foundation stone of the new Shikmim neighborhood, which is planned to consist of 52 homes in the Promised Land.
The hardline Islamic Republic of Iran has sentenced 5 Christian converts to a total of 25 years in jail. Some of the imprisoned dissidents took part in the protests known as Women, Life, Freedom that spread throughout the country, sparking violent crackdowns against the Iranian resistance. Tehran has yet to release any information about the charges brought against the Christians, but a human rights group in the country relayed the details of their sentences and emphasized the harsh conditions they face in Iranian prisons.
The governor of Louisiana has signed a bill requiring public schools to display the 10 Commandments in classrooms. Similar legislations have been advanced in Texas, Utah, and Oklahoma. The state of Louisiana has become the first state to approve the mandate to prominently display the biblical code of law, along with the Mayflower Compact and the Declaration of Independence.
Turning now to the U.S. state of New York, where the Manhattan District Attorney has dismissed charges brought against dozens of students and staff who participated in pro-Hamas protest at Columbia University. The activists were charged with trespassing during the violent anti-Israel sit-in that prevented Jewish students from attending classes. The DA's office dropped the charges, saying prosecutors could not provide sufficient evidence of individual guilt because the protesters wore masks and covered the lens of surveillance cameras.
Thailand has announced that it will send agricultural workers back to the Jewish state 8 months after the devastating Hamas attacks. Many foreign workers left Israel after October 7th, when 39 Thai farmers were slaughtered by Iranian-backed terrorists, and 32 other Thailandis were taken into Gaza as hostages. The Israeli public volunteered to salvage the damaged crops, but without an experienced workforce, the agricultural sector has suffered immensely. After 8 months of collaboration with Israeli authorities, Thailand announced last week that the first group of workers will return to the Jewish state. Bangkok said that it aims to send 10,000 workers to Israel by the year's end.
The oldest shipwreck ever found in deep waters has been discovered off the shores of Israel. The Israel Antiquities Authority announced that the 3,300-year-old ship was found intact on the eastern Mediterranean floor, 90 kilometers off the Israeli coast. The wreckage proves that sailors in the 13th and 14th centuries before the Common Era were able to navigate without sight of the shoreline. The 12-meter-long ship dates to the late Bronze Age and is filled with hundreds of containers carrying precious cargo. Archaeologists praise the potential for research, saying the wreckage has been frozen in time since the moment of disaster. That concludes the news portion of our show. Stay tuned for Ask the Source with Josh Reinstein.
Hello and welcome to Ask the Source. I'm your host, Josh Reinstein. We're here in our beautiful studio in Jerusalem. My guest today is Tricia Miller. She is Camera's Director of Partnership between Christians and Jews. Tricia, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you for having me, Josh.
Tell us a little about what is Camera?
CAMERA stands for the Committee for Accuracy in Middle East Reporting and Analysis. It's a media watch organization, the largest and oldest in the world. And I'm the director of the Partnership of Christians and Jews, specifically watching media and everything going on in the Christian world.
Well, you got your hands full since October 7th. It doesn't seem like we can get a fair shake. What are you guys doing to try to get the truth about what's happening in Israel?
There are a lot of research analysts watching all the media in English, Spanish, Hebrew, and Arabic. And then there's me watching everything going on in the Christian world, finding the errors, correcting it, writing articles, telling the truth. And I'm speaking to a lot of the Christian world about the truth.
Well, one of the things that you're doing is you're actually coming to Israel and seeing it for yourself. We appreciate that. What have you seen here that's kind of changed the narrative for you?
Well, it hasn't changed the narrative, but it's deepened everything for me. I needed the firsthand, I needed on-the-ground experience after October 7th so that I can come back as a firsthand witness and tell all the people who I'm reaching, the Christian world, specifically the evangelical world, the realities of what happened here on October 7th. Because as you know, the media's lying, the world's lying about the details, and what's impacted me by being here on this solidarity mission, what's impacted me the most is meeting the people. We went to Kfar Aza, we went to the Nova site, we went to the car graveyard, but meeting the people, Zaka workers, rescuers, survivors, and hearing their testimonies of what happened.
What bothers Israelis is that on the one hand, we're doing this operation in Gaza with a scalpel, with an arm tied behind our armor. It's the most humane urban warfare in the history of mankind. We have less civilian casualties in this war than any other urban warfare ever. Yet a lot of Israelis are like, why aren't we going in harder? Yet if you watch the news, people are saying this is a genocide. So where's the disconnect?
This war could have been over so much faster, but Israel does take all that care at the risk of their own soldiers. The IDF soldiers are dying because of the care they're taking to only target terrorists. And yet when civilians get killed, the world is in uproar that civilians got killed, but the civilians are being killed because Hamas uses them as their shields. IDF calls off strikes if there's any civilians there. So the exact opposite of everything that's heard in the news is the truth. The hospital cases, everything, even yesterday, the IDF targeted a couple terrorists, then a fire broke out. It wasn't because of what the IDF did. It was because of Hamas having weapons stored there that exploded.
I mean, this is an ongoing theme. We know this and you know this. How do we get this message out?
We have to keep talking, and we have to get louder than the other side. And one thing I want to say to your audience is that the media gives the impression that the United States is against Israel. And yes, there's been bad opposition from our administration, but the American people support Israel. And that's one thing we've been able to tell every Israeli that we meet here, is that the United States people stand with Israel and Christians stand with Israel. So we have to activate people more and equip them to get the truth out.
Well, that's a very important point. Every poll that we see, between 78 and 82% of Americans stand with Israel. Yet the Biden administration has been very aggressively anti-Israel on some of its policies, even calling for our prime minister to resign, stopping the shipments of weapons that we've bought, even saying that we are targeting civilians, things like that are outlandish like that. So where's the disconnect between the people and the administration?
Well, the people know inherently, especially the Christians, because it's an issue of faith for evangelical Christians. We have a mandate from the Scriptures to stand with Israel. So it's an issue of faith for us, and we know. And a lot of people know the media is not accurate, but we still have that battle to fight. Half the battle Israel's fighting is in the media. So what CAMRA does is to continue to correct errors, continue to put out articles that tell the truth, contact the media, but we enlist people. We have 17,000 letter writers, for example, to, we can give them an alert, tell them what's happening, and they can write letters, and address issues in the media.
One of the positive things we've seen since October 7th is that Christians have been standing with Israel like never before.
Yes.
How do we get Christians in the media fight as well?
How to get them in the media fight? That's a good question. I talk to them when I go to churches, and I talk to Christians about and give them the facts and tell them to get active. I am activating them to do that, but it needs to be done on a much wider scale.
I often say that it's Christians, not countries, that stand with Israel. It's Christians who bring their countries to Israel.
That's true.
Are we giving them enough ammo so that they can get the job done? Is that something that CAMRA's focused on?
Yes, it is. Yeah, we're giving them all the ammo that we can. And I'm giving it to the Christian world in Christian language, too, in a Christian context.
Tricia, there are literally tens of millions of people watching this show. What message do you have for our viewing audience?
I urge every Christian to come to Israel. It is safe. I'm here. There are all kinds of people here. Come to Israel. Show your support by putting your feet on the ground.
Thank you, Tricia, for being on the show. And thank you for tuning in to Ask the Source. I'm your host, Josh Reinstein. Now back to the studio.
And now the truth from Zion.
The shadow of Hezbollah's terror leader, Hassan Nasrallah, looms large over the volatile Middle East, but it was not always that way. Beirut, Lebanon used to be considered the Paris of the Middle East, not only for its French influence, but for the vibrant culture, high-end stores, world-class restaurants, and a thriving intellectual community. Today, Lebanon's capital city and the whole country has been taken over and radicalized by the terrorist organization known as Hezbollah. Freedom has been extinguished, commerce is in ruins, and government officials are unable to effect change for their own constituents. This bleak picture became reality when an evil, fanatic despot named Hassan Nasrallah seized control of Lebanon. Lebanon's government was once praised for being a beacon of diversity as Maronite Christians, Sunni Muslims, Shia Muslims, Druze, and other religions each represented seats in the parliament. Today, things appear to remain the same, but it's all just a facade. The official government rulers in Lebanon are mere puppets, and Nasrallah is pulling the strings.
Hassan Nasrallah is the evil leader of the terrorist group Hezbollah. Since October 7th, not a day has gone by without an attack on our northern communities. His time is coming to an end.
The First and Second Lebanese Wars served as crucibles for Nasrallah, shaping his worldview and solidifying his power within Hezbollah, a terrorist organization that started out as a fringe rebel group. With each conflict, Nasrallah's influence grew, as did his ambition to assert Hezbollah's dominance over internal Lebanese politics. As time went on, Hezbollah gained a significant number of seats in parliament. Through a combination of strategic alliances and sheer brute force, Nasrallah maneuvered his way into the corridors of power in Lebanon, leveraging Hezbollah's military might to do so. This unholy alliance between militant extremism and political power posed a grave threat not only to Lebanon's fragile stability, but also to Israel's security. Following the Second Lebanon War, there was a fragile ceasefire agreement in place. The Litani River, a natural border point, was where Hezbollah was supposed to draw the line and stop advancing. Anything south of the Litani River was to fall under jurisdiction of UNIFIL, the United Nations Interim Peacekeeping Force in Lebanon. Nasrallah brazenly defied the terms of the peace agreement by intentionally moving his terrorist army south of the Litani River, deploying them dangerously close to Israel's border. He strategically positioned his forces, armed and ready to attack Jews in Israel and Christians in southern Lebanese villages. Hezbollah supporters began to acquire land in the historically Christian and Druze communities. Nasrallah's plan was to populate the entire area with poor, radical, and impressionable Shiite Muslims. Christian and Druze residents became increasingly concerned for their safety as Nasrallah worked to radicalize the new Shiite residents and bring them on board as fellow Iranian proxy terrorists. Suddenly, new Iranian-funded roads were built along the Litani River. The roads began to show signs glorifying Iran with slogans and ads that stated, "In the service of the people of Lebanon." Nasrallah was allowing the Lebanese people to be seduced by his wealthy Iranian patrons. Hezbollah, a proxy for Iran's expansionist ambitions, began shooting into Israel and terrorizing Israelis. Those attacks continue to this day. But Hamas launched a genocidal attack on Israel on October 7, 2023. Hezbollah joined in the next day. The two Iranian proxies teamed up to rain rockets down into Israel. While the world is focused on the war with Hamas in Gaza, Nasrallah continues to embolden his terrorist army to move forward with his plan to annihilate Israel. Dozens of Israeli soldiers and civilians have been killed since October 7th while protecting Israel's northern border with Lebanon. Scores of others have been injured by Hezbollah's indiscriminate rocket fire. Israel finds itself at a crossroads, faced with the daunting task of confronting Nasrallah's belligerence. Israel remains steadfast in its commitment to defending its citizens and safeguarding its sovereignty. Hassan Nasrallah may wield considerable power and influence, but Israel's resolve remains unshaken. Israel wages war with terrorist regimes who crave power and leave death and destruction in their wake. Look no further than the war-ravaged countries of Syria and Lebanon, two nations completely under the control of Iran and the demonic theology of the Islamic Revolution. Up next, the ICEJ report from the International Christian Embassy, Jerusalem.
Today we're at the Magen David Dome Blood Center in Ramla. We're here to tour the facility and to learn about their preparations in the medical field in Israel. And we're also here to dedicate a Medicycle that has been donated by our Christian friends around the world.
Since 1980, the International Christian Embassy Jerusalem has been a voice of Christian support for Israel and connected the global church to the land of the Bible. Headquartered in Jerusalem, the ICEJ has taken action to stand with Israel by caring for Holocaust survivors, helping Jewish families return home to Israel, providing bomb shelters, fighting anti-Semitism around the world, and by inviting Christians to discover Israel for themselves.
We are just unveiling in a second this motor scooter that already saved the lives of 11 people, even though it's only 1 week old. Wow, here ICJ donated by the generous donation of the Korean family, Manitoba. Toda Rabah.
I think the most rewarding thing is the pure knowledge that whatever we do is to reach out a helping hand to a person in need. And it's even more fantastic when we learn that it changed their lives and are healing and are getting better. This is the most rewarding thing that any of us feel. I've been working with Christian supporters for Magen David Adom for many, many years. So to me, it's already something that, I don't know if the right term is used to, but still we admire it because it's not taken for granted. And this is a very important support because people in Israel not always understand and know how much care, love, and concern Christians from all over the world feel towards Israel as a country, to the people of Israel as human beings. And this type of support that Magen David Adom is receiving through Christian Friends of Magen David Adom, through so many ministries and Christian organizations and so forth, is a lifesaver. Christians from all over the world are our partners in saving lives. They stand shoulder to shoulder with us when we reach out and treat other patients, whether they have a heart attack or seizures or deliver a baby, or they are hurt by a car accident or terror attacks. They are all the time with us, and we in Magen David Adom feel their strength and their spirit. And I think this is the most important thing that people will know. We cherish the support. It's so important.
We want to say a huge thank you to all of our friends around the world who have donated so generously to our Israel in Crisis Fund, which is enabling us to help Israel in these difficult days with a variety of aid, whether it's these medical equipment or shelters or aid for evacuees or victims of terror or a whole variety of assistance that Israel can use in these days. We want to say thank you for giving so generously.
After Hamas brutally attacked Israel on October the 7th, 2023, the ICEJ has been actively standing with Israel and her people through advocacy and urgently needed aid projects. Now is the time for Christians to turn their love for Israel and the Jewish people into real action as never before. Your donation will help deliver bomb shelters to at-risk areas, provide necessary supplies for first responders, care for evacuees with food, shelter, clothing, and trauma care, and will eventually help rebuild these devastated communities. Visit ICEJUSA.tv to donate online or call 1-800-910-6355 and give your generous gift today.
That's all for this edition of Israel Now News. I'm Rebecca Roberts.
And I'm Yochanan El Rom, reporting from our studio in Jerusalem. Join us again next week for all of your Israel updates.